Welcome to today's episode where we talk about 1997's Eight Heads in a Duffel Bag, starring Joe Pesci, David Spade, and others.
Some others.
Stick around and find out how this movie is connected to an Oscar winner, other than Joe Pesci.
Hi, I'm Shay.
I'm Peter.
And you're listening to
Stellar Alignment. Welcome to episode 9. We're talking Eight Heads in a Duffel Bag.
Ooh.
Starring Joe Pesci, of course. The only reason that we watched this movie.
Okay.
If we seem unexcited to talk about this, it's because we are. Written and directed by Tom Schulman. You might not be familiar with Tom Schulman, but he is the writer behind Dead Poets Society, the movie starring Robin Williams, Oscar-winning screenplay. Not what you would expect when you watch this movie. So he apparently wrote a movie just last year, wrote and directed. This is only the second movie he's directed after Eight Heads in a Duffel Bag, called Double Down South. And that has an 8.8 on IMDb. So maybe he turned it around for himself.
Maybe comedies just aren't his forte.
Possibly. Anyways.
So about this movie.
Yes.
The storyline is basically Joe Pesci is traveling with a bunch of heads in a duffel bag as proof of
Assassination.
An assassination.
To give to a mob boss
Exactly.
named Sepp. And
Big Sepp.
He has to deliver these 8 heads by tomorrow, and of course that never happens.
Mm-mm.
And yeah, I mean, basically, he gets on a plane. First of all, pre-2001, none of this shit would have happened because he's just walking through security with giant bags and gets his bag switched at the airport, and
hilarity ensues, but it's not funny. It's just frustrating.
It's just super frustrating. It's a
comedy
of errors, which comedy of errors can be frustrating. That's just what they are.
But usually they're funny.
But they're funny, yeah. Not super impressed by this movie.
I think I've seen it in the past.
I know I've seen this movie a bunch when I was a kid because it was played on HBO a bunch.
But I didn't think maybe it was funnier back then.
I remember it being funnier, but I was also 13 or 14 years old. And I also was in that stage of life where I was a huge SNL fan. I was an even bigger Chris Farley fan who had done, a number of projects with David Spade. So I also found David Spade funny. And of course we get typical David Spade in this movie.
Just snarky.
He's snarky and sarcastic. He's David Spade, which he's great at. He plays snarky perfectly, but it just didn't work well. And I don't think his chemistry with Pesci was that great either.
No, usually Pesci's the charming
Yes
gangster. I don't know.
In this movie, I feel like he's playing a very one-sided version of his characters from Casino or Raging Bull to a lesser extent, or to Goodfellas, which we have up next week. He's playing kind of one-dimensional versions of that character, which is like a mob guy and a tough guy and whatever. I just, like, the writing wasn't great. I don't think Pesci originally was supposed to play the character. Apparently, Damon Wayans was originally slotted to play the role of Tommy, who eventually goes to Joe Pesci, but dropped out and just a few weeks before shooting, and the role went to Pesci. And I don't know if they rewrote it to be more of like a Pesci-esque character. Damon Wayans doesn't seem like he would have fit in because it's all supposed to be like Italian mafia, so it makes sense for it to be Joe Pesci, but
unless they just switched out all the other guys in the background.
Possibly, or maybe he's just like a contract guy that they hired. Either way, I just still don't think it would work. You have the character of Ernie, played by David Spade. You have the character of Steve, played by Todd Louiso, who's been in a few things. I recognize him from
his face.
Jerry Maguire, among other movies. He's actually a pretty funny actor, I think. Whenever he's in stuff, he's always pretty good. High Fidelity,
High
he was also
Fidelity.
in. Yeah. And I really
He,
feel like that character could just been one person.
yeah.
And I don't know if like they created two characters because they're like, well, we've got David Spade, he can do snarky. We need this other guy to be not so sure about what they're doing. But
Yeah.
I really felt like it could just been one
I
character.
feel like also, yeah, there were maybe too many characters. This whole random other guy. I know Charlie's the main character or one of the main characters, but
It just, yeah, there's too much going
he,
on. You got
who,
this guy
who's
Charlie
this guy?
that Pesci meets on the plane. They're sitting next to each other. They're sitting next to each other and coincidentally also had the exact same bag, which got confused with each other when they landed.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie's going to
Classic
meet
airport.
his girlfriend, played by Kristy Swanson, and her parents, George Hamilton and Dyan Cannon.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this whole side of it, and they're going down to Mexico. He's meeting the parents for the first time, and she's thinking about breaking up with him. And then, I mean, at the end of the movie, they like show pictures of them getting married because, I don't know, she changes her mind, which is dumb. But it has nothing to do with the actual movie. And then you bring George Hamilton's mother into the mix briefly,
Yeah.
just so
And
Pesci
she's
could, just awful. And I feel like it's just so Pesci could push her out of a van.
Basically, so
Yeah.
that the
So
actual mom
that
would be
one
like,
gag, they could do that one gag,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. They did feel like they did a lot for the one gag.
Yeah,
It was weird. I didn't like it.
it was really weird. And ultimately, the funniest parts I feel like they think are the movie are the dead heads, and I think that a lot of this is practical effects, so they're very convincing heads.
They are. They were really good heads.
And I can kind of remember hearing about this when this movie came out and it being like a big selling point about how realistic the heads are. And of course, there's probably the most well-known scene of the movie is the Mr. Sandman scene where they change the lyrics to Mr. Hitman, and Pesci's having a dream and all the heads are singing to him
But what's the point of the dream?
to show off, like, I don't know, like some sort of effects that they had. I don't know if those were computer. I think that maybe there's a little bit of both there. And it's 1997, so like those types of effects are a big deal, right? Something like that was probably really impressive in 1997.
Okay. But what did it have to do with
It had
the
nothing
movie?
to do with the movie, and it was just like, oh, look at this cool scene of severed heads singing Mr. Sandman.
Yeah, no idea.
Yeah. I think the sad part is we like comedies with Joe Pesci.
We do. He's a funny guy.
And he's the straight man in this, and they don't allow Pesci to be funny.
Or charming. And
He can be a straight man.
yes.
I'm sure he can be. But it just didn't work in this movie because there wasn't
'Cause
anyone to...
anyone else was not funny.
Yeah.
There was nobody else that was funny. They
You
should have made Pesci funny.
occasionally have snarky David Spade where it's like, huh, but that's about it. I think Steve's character is
when
the
he
one
starts to lose it,
the
was
one
the only one that was funny.
that actually got you to laugh once throughout
One
this
time.
movie.
One
And
time.
for anyone that doesn't know my wife, she laughs at a lot of things, and a lot of the times it's very inappropriate. We go to the movie theater and something happens and she'll be the only one that laughs at something in a completely silent movie theater. This is my wife. So if you have a comedy that doesn't cause her to laugh, you've done something wrong. So Steve manages to bring a laugh out of you at the very end of the movie when he's running around with one of the heads because he's mentally lost it after having to deal with his hitman and having to cut off heads of cadavers. He's lost it a little bit.
Lost it. It was funny.
The only
That was
other
a
part
funny
that
part.
I felt like was funny is when he's in the car with all of them and he's talking to one of the heads and he's like, "Are you talking to me? Are you talking to me?" Which is obviously a reference to Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese in Taxi Driver. So I feel like they must have added that in because of Joe Pesci, but
Yeah.
they could have directly quoted Pesci from a movie too,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Maybe. Wasted potential. The idea could have been so funny.
that's the thing, is I
So funny.
think the concept of a hitman who has to transport 8 severed heads and loses the heads has so much potential to be a hilarious movie.
Super funny.
And they totally botched it.
I wonder if they've like remade it in some other fashion. Like this idea.
I'm so
Like the switching of bags thing
we didn't
that
find
happened,
as much
but
trivia as we normally do on
no,
this.
no, no.
But I'm wondering if the same thing is like, did they do a ton of rewrites? I also saw a bit of trivia that I don't know is true or not, but I saw that Will Smith was originally considered to play David Spade's character for $10 million, but then turned it down. This could be total bullshit. But if it's true, if Will Smith was supposed to be Ernie and maybe a Damon Wayans was supposed to be Tommy Pesci's character, maybe it was a completely different movie before, right? And they had to do a bunch of rewrites to
Fit
change
these
the
other
characters
people
around.
in.
And it didn't quite work. Either way, we know the movie did not work well. There, it didn't make much sense that, like,
What if David Spade was the Charlie character? We got rid of that rando, and then it was just David Spade and Joe Pesci.
who's the
for
actor
rest of
that
the
plays Charlie? Who's essentially, I don't want to call him the
I've
main
s-
character because there's too many characters to really call anyone the main
I've
character.
seen him before.
Andy Cameau. I really think I only know him from this movie, to be honest. I feel like he is just the guy who plays Ted in How I Met Your Mother, just 10 years older,
Huh. I
right?
don't like that.
I look at them and I just see the same guy. Ultimately, I feel like the script was not great. Whether it was rewrote a bunch, I don't know, but it wasn't very
It was lacking.
impressive. The story wasn't great. I
The jokes weren't
didn't
hitting.
care about any of the characters. And even like the editing, like it jumped back and forth between the characters in Mexico and then Joe Pesci with the David Spade and the other guy, like, and it just didn't flow well. And then you get to the end where Joe Pesci's character and the main guy Charlie meet up again, and for whatever reason
They
bond
bonded.
for like, and I don't know
He's
why.
gotten Joe Pesci's respect, something that David Spade couldn't do, even though he was
They
helping
spent
there.
and they spent way more time
way
together.
more time together.
Yeah, really forced. It was not that funny, and I gotta be honest. We'll go through the rating process, but I think I'm gonna bump up Easy Money, and I'm gonna place this at number one. What did Rotten Tomatoes
So
have?
Rotten Tomatoes, the tomato meter was a 10%
Yeah.
rotten.
And a
Audience score 35%.
35%. And IMDb, wow, a 5.4, 54% for IMDb. So
That's better.
that's much better,
But-
but still not great. I consider anything in 5 or lower in IMDb to probably be something to
A
avoid.
bust.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't feel like we rushed through this one, but
We just don't have a lot.
we don't have a lot to say about it because it was a comedy and we didn't laugh.
I laughed once.
And the story wasn't good enough to care about it. I thought that Easy Money was going to be number one, and there was no removing that from that position. I guess I remember Eight Heads in a Duffel Bag
To be
being
funnier.
better when I was younger, and shame on younger me, because it is not a good movie. I love you, Joe Pesci, but this is not one of your good ones.
This is not one of the good ones. You're so funny. If they just made you funny in this,
Yeah.
I feel like it would have been a different movie.
Even good actors can't save a bad script.
Yeah.
I think that's the moral of this episode. So I'm gonna give this one a 1 and bump Easy Money up to 2.
Yep, me too.
You're gonna do the same?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's unfortunate, but I hope you enjoyed this super short and sweet episode where we discuss very briefly
Very briefly.
Eight Heads in a Duffel Bag. Next week, however, Goodfellas. And I'm sure we're going to have plenty to say about Goodfellas.
Tons. strap in for a
we're
long one.
we're going to definitely step it up a little bit and have a pretty good conversation. I'm really excited about this one. Thank you for listening today. If you have any thoughts on 8 heads in a duffel bag, if you think that we're wrong, please let us know. Leave a comment down below. Hit us up on Instagram at Stellar Alignment Podcast. Same with YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter.
Like, subscribe, follow.
Please help us out.
Yes.
Thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week for Goodfellas.